Hello, and welcome to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight's topic, Cryptid Encounters, Dogman. I am your host, Spooky, and here is your other most awesome host, Raven.
Hey,
Hey, how you doing?
good. I don't know, you're kind of choppy, so I'm hoping the internet goes smooth. Nothing happens. We'll just knock on wood. Um, I'm just getting a little under the weather a little bit, but I'm hoping to kick this soon. But tonight's topic was, again, another viewer's request.
Yeah, we try to get to them just as soon as we can, and here lately, though, we've been getting to a lot of them.
Yeah, that's true. And it's like, we kind of want to do more cryptid stuff. I know we've done a lot of the Bigfoot, but we haven't done so much of the other ones lately. But
I know, and I enjoy the cryptids.
yeah. Now, when it comes to this topic, Dogman, people are we're gonna have some people on one side of the fence and other people on the other. Some people are gonna believe, and there's some people are just not gonna believe at all, and that's okay. Because you and I, we're not here to convince anyone, but we're just gonna kind of like share with you guys some stuff we kind of stumbled on. I mean, there are other people out there that dedicate their channel and their website to really researching this, and of course we're a part of, we joined these groups and we're really interested in them and stuff like that. But tonight we're kind of just gonna take it easy and just share some kind of different encounters and different thoughts and theories and things that we came across while you know researching into this and learning more about this Dogman
Right.
stuff.
And I'm the first one to admit that I know nothing about dogmen. In fact, I hardly heard the term up until about a year or so ago. And for a long time, Raven tried to get me to listen to this channel about them on YouTube. But for the longest time, I really resisted. I know the reason was because, I wasn't hearing the word dogman. I was hearing the word werewolf mentioned. And I absolutely do not believe that a human being can transform into a wolf or any kind of animal. So I just resisted. I mean, she kept at me and kept at me and kept at me, and I just kept resisting.
Well, it's not like I was nagging you. I was just like, you really need to check these out, because I was just amazed at listening to all these people's encounters and run-ins with this thing that they called the Dogman. Because growing up, I all we knew about was werewolves, like you were saying, and I think when I was saying Dogman, all you kept hearing was, or thinking in your head was, like werewolf, because of
Right.
like Hollywood stuff, or just what you're used to, and that's how people used to always call them and stuff. But that's not the term what people are kind of labeling it today.
Well, I just could not get the word out of my head.
Yeah.
But I finally realized that the word werewolf was the best way that some of these people who had these encounters could describe what they saw. But eventually I did give in and I listened to a couple of episodes, and actually I became very interested in learning more about them. Like I joined a group on Facebook. I started to research encounters, and I have to say, I was amazed at the number of reports of personal encounters that I found. It, it just
Shocked you?
numerous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
shocked
it
you.
just shocked me. I did not know that these reports are almost as common as Bigfoot reports or really other cryptids.
Yeah, and of course my cat's already. He's like, "Oh, the show's starting," and now he's already pounding on the door again. So I'm hoping he'll go away here in a second. But if not, I'm gonna have to go let him in. But for years, it seems many people, from what I was gathering, from all walks of life, have crossed paths with something that they cannot explain. Other than it being that of like a werewolf slash dogman beast, that walks bipedal, and it's ranging in height, and it has, like, I guess a lot of them were saying it sort of has like this massive build, like that of a bodybuilder. And they always talk about this thing having like glowing eyes that just pierce deep within your soul, when it makes eye contact with you. And it's not like, where people say like the eye glow is not like, where a cat or another animal, they have like that reflective eye shine due to like an outside source, but that these eyes actually emit their own shine.
Right. And the main thing I noticed when doing my research is the description of the creature hardly ever changed at all. I mean, we're talking about a bipedal creature. I started to say character. A bipedal creature that sometimes walked on all fours, dark fur covering its entire body except for the chest and stomach area, a very muscular body that resembled a man's body or a bodybuilder,
Mm-hmm.
a canine or a wolf head, like 6 to 9 feet tall, sometimes a bit taller. I think I read where they have been reported as much as 10, 11 feet tall. Pointed ears, amber eyes, sometimes red eyes, sometimes yellow. Muscular legs, hands that look like human hands with these long claw like nails. And some even reported it smelling like rotting meat and urine, while others reported no smell at all.
You know you're too close when you smell it.
Yeah, really. That's true.
Yeah, there's somebody in chat who's listening right now, who's telling how they've actually had an encounter with one of these things too. So maybe you can write that down and we'll mention it on the air. But while I was searching through like tons of newspaper articles, because you know how I always like to look up newspapers and for every show and find as much as we can. I did come across several like interesting articles, but there was this one that I did come across that was I guess it came out like in 1987, and they were talking about this TV series that they called Werewolf. Now I've never seen it, you know, not old enough, but I remember that they had produced or I read that they produced like 29 episodes. And the reason why they kind of called it off is because it was too expensive to keep creating all the morphine, from the guy turning into werewolf or whatever. It was like really a costly TV series to keep up, but I guess it was pretty popular. But it was about this college student who was like searching for like the head bloodline so that he could kill that person to rid himself of the curse. But while this TV series was being aired, they had advertised this viewer's toll-free number where people could call in or write in to this werewolf sighting center that was ran by this guy. His name was Dr. Stephen Kaplan. I believe that's how you say his last name. Anyway, he kind of consulted with this TV series to try to give him ideas on how this werewolf creatures are. And but this guy, he's really well known for his studies and research in like the paranormal. He was like an instructor in like parapsychology at one point, like New York State University. He had an expert in like vampirism stuff, and he's a founder of both like Vampire and the Werewolf Research Center back in the day. And I think he also had like a Parapsychology Institute of America all around in New York or whatever. But he was also known for actually, I think, being one of the first ones to debunk that like Amityville horror thing back in the day. But
Yeah.
anyway, while this show was airing, why I found this interesting was because he was conducting like this worldwide, or attempting to, I should say, and finding real werewolves. And it was said that in the first few months of this TV series airing, that they had over 346,000 people call in, all trying to tell their encounters with a werewolf creature. Now, a lot of these people were calling in from California, New York, Minnesota, the Great Lakes area, and just a bunch of other states. And I guess back when this show was airing, they also advertised like the PO address so people could write in too. And I guess in like 3 months that it was airing, they had a bunch of, I think like over 500 letters that also came in where people were sharing their encounters. They were talking about what this creature looks like, and that they also believed that some of these unsolved murder cases in their area were actually attributed to these werewolf creatures. And some of them were saying that some of them thought they were werewolves themselves, So of course you're going to get a little bit of everything. But
Yeah.
this werewolf hotline, I guess, was set up to actually invite people to call in to help the research and studies and help this guy find and track down real werewolves or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But what I found interesting was the things that this guy was kind of talking about. And I think you guys should, kind of look this show up because it kind of sounds like it was an interesting TV series. But also look up the Kaplan guy, Kaplan. But I'm just, how cool would it have been to be a volunteer back in the day and work at one of his centers, just to be able to read and or hear all those accounts that were coming in of people who were talking about that they were having these run-ins with all these different, because they called them werewolf back then, that was the term that they were using of these things, you know what I mean? Which is kind of what he was doing back then, is kind of like what Dogman Encounters channel is doing now, you know? But I just wish, you know, he would have published them somewhere for us to read or to hear, and maybe he did, I just hadn't come across it yet while I was doing my research. But I thought it was just really interesting article, because I had no idea that they had something going on in the 80s where all these people were calling in, and like I said, that was like almost what, at the time when it was all running, it was all airing, they said at least about 500,000 people had called in during the 80s to that hotline, all talking about encountering or seeing or knowing somebody who was like a dog man or dog woman. They called them, you know, werewolves back then, you know what I mean? But I don't know, who knows? There's just so many things that are out there and things that people are seeing. And we have heard so many stories of like skinwalkers in several different countries. It's just hard for me to, I guess, wrap my mind around a person morphing into something, you know, because it's hard for me to understand how something like that can even be possible. I can't, I'm not saying that it can or can't happen. I mean, I guess there's always the possibility, but, you know, some say these things are like genetic creatures created by the government, while other people say these are just like cryptid animals and they've always been here. And they've been talked about throughout, you know, our human history in several areas all across the planet. And, you know, both you and I have talked about on different shows about how, you know, like the indigenous people were traversing across the Americas and how they came across several different breeds of humanoids, you know, because they all talked about Bigfoots, they talked about dogmans, they talked about birdmen, you know, like flying humanoids. They talked about lizard people, ant people, and so on. So, I always found that interesting, you know, that people talk about in the history, and the natives talk about how they've encountered these things way back in the day. But then there's other people who believe that these things are dimensional jumpers, or they're demons, or they're aliens, you know?
Well, in the 1980s, wasn't that when werewolf movies were popular? It seemed, I think they were. Um, I I find it hard to believe. I really do. I find it very, very hard to believe that a person can change into an animal. I know a lot of people believe that they can, like with the skinwalkers. Um, but I just absolutely do not believe in werewolves. I just don't.
Well, the
Um,
term as far as people morphing into another animal and then morphing back, that's what you mean by that. You're not
right.
saying that you don't believe in the possibility of a creature being out there like a dog man.
No, it's not that I don't believe there are dogmen out there. I just don't believe that they were at one time human. Um, and I got to be honest, I don't know if I believe in dimensional jumpers or not. However, I do believe in demons and aliens. Um, but it's just kind of hard. Some of these theories out there, it's just kind of hard for me to even wrap my mind around it. And I'm pretty much an open-minded person.
Right. I'm sorry I laughed a little bit, but my cat was like poking me in the back, like, hey, you know, and I'm just like, really? I just let you in. No.
He wants his 5 minutes of fame.
Right. Either way, people are encountering something, you know.
Right, they are. They are encountering something.
Right. There's something that's very real, and people have dedicated their lives to, you know, documenting and researching these things. And I think what really got me interested in finding out more about this, when one of our friends that we had known had told us about how they were having a dogman creature that was stalking their family's property for years, and they actually have photos of the bipedal wolf prints that they got, you know, in the wintertime, which we aired on a show one time. And we also seen other strange things via their IR cams too. But it got me, after talking to them and seeing the stuff that we did at their place, it got me to doing some searching on my own. And that's when I came across, you know, all these different channels like Dogman Encounters and things like that. and I was listening to several people sharing their run-ins and whatnot, but not all of them were the same. Some said, there was like a variation of these things. And I believe that because we have several variations of dogs and cats and birds. So why not, dogman or women and Bigfoots? I don't think it's just one exact breed, but I think there is a variation of them, but it's still one species,
Right. I could hardly believe the number of reports I found. I mean, there are reports and stories of Dogman encounters in just about every state, if not all of them. Now, I don't know about you, but when I thought about a Dogman encounter, I would think, well, out in some remote forest or on an isolated country road, kind of like Bigfoot. But this is not always the case. I mean, there are reports of people of these things coming into towns and even large cities. And many of you have heard about the Michigan Dogman or the Beast of Bray Road, and we have even discussed them on previous shows when we talked about the Beast of Javaden.
Yeah, I think one of the first ones I ever listened to, or one of the first ones I ever listened to, was like this woman. Her name was Danielle Steedman, Stead man, and she was on. She has her own channel. It's called Dogman Diaries or whatever. But man, her encounter was so scary as heck. I think she was like 14 years old when it occurred. But she was in a vehicle, her boyfriend vehicle. She was with her friend, and the other guys were out doing something outside or whatever. But this thing was trying to open the car door when her and her friend were in there because they had snuck out at nighttime type of thing when you're a teenager and stuff. But I think it was episode 83 on Dogman Encounters, so you can guys go and listen to it. But I think that was one of the very first ones I listened to, and it just got me hooked. But it was such a terrifying encounter. And these things are so wicked smart. They've been known to go into people's houses. They know open doors. I've heard even stories where people have said they've actually removed backlight light bulbs out of the, so that they can creep around your house and not be detected by your sensor lights,
Right. I was reading reports about that too, and I thought, wow, these things are highly intelligent. And it seems that, like, Wisconsin is a hotbed for Dogman encounters, although, like I said, there are reports in just about every state. But I found quite a few of them in Wisconsin, like in 1972 in rural Jefferson City, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. This woman called the police that an unknown animal tried to break into her home, and she said it came to her door and tried to get in. And then she said after it tried to get into her house, it just, it then went out to her barn and it injured one of her horses. Now, this horse had deep scratches from its neck to its rump. Dang. And the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources investigated the incident, and in their report, they even mentioned of finding these footprints that were about 15 inches long. Now, the only description, though, that she gave was it walked upright. It was about 8 feet tall and covered with hair. And some people actually believe that this was a Bigfoot incident, but Bigfoot researchers claim that they're not usually that aggressive. In 2015 in St. Louis, Missouri, one night around 10 p.m., this man, it didn't give his name, was taking his trash cans out to the curb for the next morning pickup. And he had this flashlight with him because it was night. And he was rolling his cans out when he reached his fence, and he saw this wolf-like creature crouched down just on the other side of the fence. Now, this is a good example of one coming into town. He said it had yellow eyes and short gray, dark hair, and it was about 8 foot tall and around 300 pounds and very muscular. He said that they locked eyes, and then the creature turned to its right, dropped to all fours, and took off. And he said that it jumped. In one jump, which was over 12 feet, and it landed in the neighbor's driveway. This man said that suddenly panic set in. He dropped the trash can and ran back into the house, where he grabbed his gun. He locked himself in his room all night. Now, he also believes that it returned at least once that he knows of. Uh, I used to watch this program. Well, I still do when it's on. It's called Monsters and Mysteries in America.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an episode of this family that moved to a property in, I believe it was Maine. But you know what? Now that I think about it, though, I think that you and I have talked about this before, actually, on a previous show. But this was actually my first introduction into the Dogman subject. Anyway, they moved to the
Wait!
country and
Hold on, Spooky. But my microphone keeps going down in levels, so I don't know. I don't know why my computer's acting up again. But normally it does pretty good. So hold on, guys. Let me see if I can try to fix it here for a second. Sorry about that. And just hold off on what you were talking about, Spooky.
okay.
But you guys can hear Spooky okay, right? You have to read chat for me, Spooky.
It says Harley Man says that he hears me fine, but you're faint. Was low good.
Yeah, I don't know why this thing is going up and down. No, it's kind of being a pain in the butt now. But, hopefully I got it. No, it just keeps going up and down. I don't know why this thing is being weird. So, I'll just keep a check on the level. I don't know why this is doing this. All I can do is possibly we can hang up the Skype and try it again. I have no idea how to make this work.
Maria says that she can hear both of us. And BPG says, I can hear both of you the best. Harley Man says, there you go. I hear you both fine. Penny
Yeah,
Walton.
I don't know. It's going up and down still on my level, and it shouldn't be moving at all. So,
Annie says both of us are good.
well, you'll just have to talk quieter, I guess.
So doesn't Nell, Native Earth Lady.
Yeah, I don't know. Mine's still going up and down on the levels and stuff. So I'll just talk closer to the microphone, and hopefully it'll work, and you guys will hear us. But anyway, I know you're talking about interdimensional aliens and things like that. You were talking about that.
I was talking about the program that we saw that we did about the people that moved to the property in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, this was actually my first introduction into the Dogman subject. Uh, anyway, like I said, you and I actually did mention this on a show. Anyway, they moved into the country, and while out walking, they found this den-like cave. And of course, one of them had to crawl into it and check it out. And that night, they noticed some flashes of light, and before they knew it, they were surrounded by these wolf creatures that walked on two legs. Now, these things surrounded them and taunted them all night long. And for some reason, the man had his guns in the barn. Now, why? I'm not sure. I think, if I remember right, it was because his wife didn't want them in the house. Anyway, the guy tried a few times to get to the barn, but he never did. And one thing they noticed about these creatures was they would not come into the light. And it just so happens they did have a few motion activated floodlights, but not enough to get to the barn. And after being harassed all night by these things, come daylight, they were gone. It was like they just disappeared, and no one was sure where they went or even where they came from. I'm not sure if the den had anything to do with it, and there is speculation that because of the flashing lights seen just before their arrival, that they were interdimensional or even aliens. They also never said if the things ever came back, but I'll bet you, though, after that, I'll bet his guns were in the house now.
Well,
They're in the house now.
if I remember, I thought they bailed and never went back to that place. You know what I mean? But I recall, that as well, and talk about scary encounter. But I think we talked about it on our Beast of Devaden show, actually. But talking about scary encounters, this last time when I was up at the farm, just like a week or so ago, I was out like blueberry picking in the woods alone, and which a lot of times I'm up there, I'm by myself. I'll go out in the woods and pick berries during July and stuff. But I heard something, and it was kind of like walking on, the dead foliage and the sticks like that. And I looked up, and there was this wolf that was trotting right towards my direction, and he or she wasn't even 200 feet away from me. And I instinctively like popped up, and I yelled at it like, get out of here, because I threw my arms up, and I yelled like, hey, get out of here, get out of here now. And this thing stopped trotting at me. It turned and went off in another direction for a little bit, but then it stopped and it turned and looked at me again. And by that time, I had ran over to the four-wheeler, and I cranked it on really quick, and I revved it as loud as I could, and then the thing took off a little bit more, and then it stopped and looked at me again, and I hopped on the four-wheeler, and I grabbed the berries, and I just, took off out of there. But the thing was about this is I was out by myself. Normally, I never borrow the four-wheeler and drive up there. Usually, I'll just walk. I was about 40 acres or so away from our house or whatever, so I was way out in the woods, and you know how the woods are, it's just like an open zoo. You have to pay attention to your surroundings, because you're in the woods where there's a lot of animals, a lot of predators and everything else. And I was bending down picking up berries, and I just happened to look up, and then I saw this huge dog, and I thought, whose dog out here? And I thought, that's not a dog, there's no dog out here, that's a wolf. And it was like a reddish grayish color with a little bit of yellow in it, and I remember it had like pointy ears, and it was just panting, and it was trotting, and it was like huge, because timber wolves are really ginormous. And I just remember thinking, like, if I didn't look up at that moment when I did, because this thing was literally only 200 feet in front of me, and I'm out in the middle of the wilderness, this thing would have been on top of me. And I was really lucky that my body instinctively acted the way that it did, and jumping up and hollering at it. And I was really lucky that this thing ran away for a second instead of going into defense mode and attacking me, because this thing could have this whole incident could have happened in a whole different manner, But when you see one wolf, you know that there's the rest of the pack is nearby. They're not usually out by themselves unless they've been kicked out from the pack. And if they've been kicked out from the pack, they're usually sick or what have you. And I did have a gun on me at the time, but being how close we were, that thing could have been on top of me, and there would have been no time I would have been able to get the gun out of the holster in order to shoot a round off in order to scare it away or whatever. But I normally go in the woods anyway prepared. I bring water, I bring food, a knife, a handkerchief and stuff in a backpack, so because you should never go out there. And the thing was, I was using my GoPro for a while. I had it turned on, and then I thought, well, who wants to watch me berry picking for an hour? So I ended up, getting up, I turned it off, and I set it on the four-wheeler, and then I went back to berry picking. And if I would have just left that thing on just a tad longer, I would have had the whole encounter captured on video. And it's just, I was kind of surprised that this wolf didn't catch wind of me while I was out there, or didn't smell me or anything. I know you don't make a lot of noise when you're out there by yourself and stuff, but I mean, you just can't become complacent when you're in the woods. You always have to check your surroundings and stuff. But like I was saying, I was extremely lucky how my body instinctively reacted the way it was. I was really lucky the way that the wolf reacted the way that it did. It trotted away from me and then turned to see what I was. You know what I mean? But wolves are not pets. They're not like domestic animals. A lot of people think like, oh, I wouldn't have reacted the way that you did. I would have just, said, I would have sat there and watched it or whatever. I'm like, no, you wouldn't. You've been tore up, But, just I remember before I went out, I kind of had a feeling that something was going to happen, that I was going to run into something. You know how you just kind of have a knowing or a feeling that just, I don't know why, but I think a lot of people have experiences where you kind of get an indication that something may happen to you that day, so make sure you pay attention. And I remember I read this article about this girl who went hiking on a trail during, class break, and she was tracked by coyotes. And all that she had on her was like a small pocket knife, and she used that to defend herself enough to crawl away from these coyotes that were attacking her. And she pulled herself into like this small outhouse building and got the door closed, and other hikers ended up finding her because they found a trail of blood that led up to this little outhouse building. But unfortunately, this woman, she didn't live because of all the wounds and stuff. But it's just, it just goes to show you, that, things can happen so quickly. And people were like, why didn't you get a photo? Well, like, why didn't they get a photo of the Dogman, or why didn't they get a photo of the wolf? Because things like this happen so quickly. You don't really react in a time.
The last thing you think about is taking a picture. I mean, I've been in situations where I've had my camera there, and I didn't, I was either in awe or shock or amazed or whatever. I didn't think about taking a picture. You were lucky, though, that it came out the way that it did, because it could have come out a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
A whole lot worse.
I might have not been sitting here today. And normally, like
exactly.
I said, I never even drive the four-wheeler out there. I walk out there. So I'm everything played out the way it was meant to play out, and I'm just glad, because I looked up a few times because I kept hearing something, and I thought, oh, it's probably just a squirrel or, like a deer or whatever. And then
it was probably a surprise to see you as you were to see it. I think that's why it probably hesitated.
Right. Well, literally, it wasn't even like 200 feet away. It's like a room, one wall to the next wall type of thing. You know what I mean? And I literally looked up, my mind thought, oh, whose dog is that? And then I was like, that's no dog. And then it's like my body reacted on its own. I flew up. I made myself look as large as I could. I yelled in a deeper voice, which is really impossible for me to do with my type of my voice. You know what I mean? But I was quite surprised that I instinctively reacted on it the way that I did. Because after I got back to the farm and I thought about everything and thought, oh man, how lucky I was, how everything played out, and how our body just has this built-in ability to react to situations like this. But, there are people who have these encounters while they're out in the woods that aren't as lucky with known predators or with the cryptid kind as well, and one of them being the LBL incident. A lot of people talk about this. This was brought up for us to talk about. The LBL incident is something that, supposedly occurred during the 80s, and the Land Between the Lakes is this national recreation area that's located both in Kentucky and in Tennessee. It's near the Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley. Now, LBL has, like, I think 170
about 170,000
acres, protected acres of nature. And from what I read, they have at least over 1 million people who go and visit there every year. They have camping, they have hiking, they have fishing, swimming, hunting, etc., etc. And they have like 500 some miles of trails that people like to go explore deep into the nature and all this stuff. And now, for years, there has been reports of people having encounters with cryptids, some with Bigfoots, others say that of Dogman. Now, there is this story that's been talked about on the net by many people, because I was reading it all over the place. But a lot of it, I think, kind of started from this woman. I guess her name was Jan, and a few others who are known, that they actually heard from a few men who were like police officers or whoever were witness to this crime scene and such firsthand. Now, apparently, it was the start of like camping season for LBL, and a lot of tourist people were coming in, and there was this couple from, I guess they say, is Florida, and they had 2 kids. One was an 8-year-old boy, another was a 5-year-old girl. And they came to camp out at the LBL area for a few days with their RV. Now, they spoke about, with one of the park rangers, asking different questions or whatever a few days before to find a good camping spot or whatever. And I guess according to Jan's story and a few others, she tells that on the net of what she heard from the people who were witness to this, I guess, that one of the park rangers or whoever at the time heard people screaming, and he heard some strange animal howls or whatever. So he went to go out and investigate the source of the sounds. I hope my mic's loud enough for people, because now I'm worried it's still messing up. But anyway, so he went to go check out, where these screams were coming from and everything else. And that's when he came upon, the family's RV site. And he saw that the door was dangling, and it was barely on its hinges. A few of the panes of the glass were shattered. So the ranger pulled out his gun, and he called out to the campers, and he was getting no reply. And as he approached slowly, it was said that he appeared his head into the camper, and that's when he discovered like this really grisly scene. And he ran back to his vehicle and he radioed in for backup and for the sheriff. And while he waited for backup to arrive and stuff, that's when he was kind of waiting around, and that's when he discovered kind of like what played out in the earlier events. Obviously, an attack happened. And when they walked up to the tore up RV, I just kind of drew some pictures tonight because, I mean, there's really no actual photos of this. There's no real actual photos of Dogman that we can use, so I just kind of drew up photos tonight. But when the backup and the guys walked up to the RV, they found inside a pool of blood. They found severed arms belonging to the mother, and the rest of her body was laying up against another part of the, the backside of the RV, partially eaten. They said the husband's body was, found in different places, some in the RV, some of it outside. And according to some sites, they said his legs and his limb were tore off. He was decapitated. And I guess the little boy's body was found torn apart too. Some say he was partially found in the camper, probably like in the bathroom area, but where there was other sites that were saying that they thought that both the dad and the son were found outside. But irregardless, all of them were tore up by some type of animal, partially eaten, and just, it was a grisly scene, And they found this little girl's clothing kind of shredded up around on the ground, so they were all looking for this little girl. And supposedly one of them spotted this girl way up in a tree. Her body was, basically shoved up and stuck up in a branch area. And how they spotted her is because I guess her blood was dripping down and hit somebody on the forehead. Now they said that she was partially eaten, but it was said that after a while, the government men got involved, and everyone who was witness to this crime scene were told not to speak about this incident. But like I said, I couldn't really find anything in my digging up, where I like to find the newspaper articles or obituaries or anything. I couldn't really find anything talking about this other than these few people who were saying that they heard it from people who had worked the crime scene, and I didn't really see anywhere they mentioned names, of anything. But I did notice that the North American Dogman Project, they have like this documentary coming out on the LBL where they had an interview with someone who supposedly worked for the LBL DNR, and they talk about the deaths, and they also talk about 2 campers in 1979 who were killed. And all these people are saying basically that this was like a big cover-up that occurred so that they wouldn't alarm the public, to stop people from visiting the LBL area. And because, with 1 million people coming and camping, visiting, and swimming and all that stuff, that brings in a lot of money,
Oh, yeah.
But
they didn't want to lose that revenue.
So this is how it's all playing out. But also some people are saying that there was a hunter who was bow hunting that was killed as well in the LBL area. And his family actually contacted authorities because he had failed to show up back home when they, the people who went looking for him, they located his vehicle, and that's when they found his campsite, I guess, all tore up. And his body was located, I guess, a mile or so away from his tent or whatever. But his body was showing signs that he was attacked by a large predator animal as well. Now, there was another account, supposedly, of a group of campers during the 70s who had an encounter in the LBL area where they were chased out of the woods, and their vehicle was actually attacked and damaged by a wolf-like creature. Now, I did find articles talking about, the deer population is down in the LBL area, and people say that has to do with the cryptids, not so much humans hunting them. There was another article where I found where I read there was a couple of women who were murdered, but by a person, not by an animal. So I was, not to
really interrupt you, but BPG wants to know if this is all your artwork, and yes, it is. Raven is a very talented artist, and you can tell by the photos that are up.
But I forgot what I was saying. Oh, so I was really trying to find anything that mentioned people who perished in the LBL area, and I was just coming up with nothing. But many people have theorized to why these to this family was killed by a dog, they believe it was a dog man or dog woman, is because they said that the DNA of the saliva and fur and blood that was tested in the area came back as an unidentified species like that of a wolf or canine sorts. And Kentucky and Tennessee doesn't have timber wolves. You know, they might have coyotes
Right.
and stuff, but they don't have large wolves and stuff. Now, some people are saying that this family, they ended up camping in the wrong spot, that they kind of encroached in on the territory of these dogmen, and possibly the dad was probably wearing a musk cologne that, you know, I guess irritates these things. Or, you know, possibly that they had urinated outside and it kind of triggered a response. Other people are saying that, you know, maybe the mom was in her menstrual cycle and it could have attracted these things in. I mean, nobody really knows. I don't really know for a fact this happened or not, because I couldn't find proof, but a lot of people are swearing that this is a true event that happened and that was a cover-up. But, you know, as far as the dogman being attracted in because of her menstrual cycle or whatever, it wouldn't have been the first encounter I heard about that doing, you know, about people talking about that, because there was something that I read or heard when it came to a Bigfoot, because I remember reading something where this Bigfoot attacked, or several Bigfoot attacked this woman's cabin and killing her, and she had warned, you know, days before previously her neighbors who came up camping for the summer, that because they had teenage girls and stuff, and they said that she told them that you need to burn your female hygienic items, you know what I mean? Don't just leave them out in the trash. Make sure you burn it so that you don't keep attracting these things in. And these things ended up killing her. I guess these Bigfoot type things were stalking her, and they broke into her cabin and they killed her or whatever. And I'll find that link to that one so you guys can read more in detail of the things that we're talking about tonight, because we're kind of paraphrasing a lot of stuff just to kind of throw a lot out there for you guys, to get you interested, to make you research more, to look into more stuff, you know. But like our friend, remember we had a friend who came on and she shared with us one of her encounters with the dogmen.
Right.
And we'll post that, we'll attach that show to this one later on after tonight. But this thing kept coming back to her place on many occasions. And oftentimes her and her family would go out in the woods because they had to cut wood for their fireplace for the winter. And I had asked her one time, you know, had you ever had to use the bathroom while you were out there? And she replied, well, yeah, I have. So it kind of made me wonder if this dogman caught their scent and followed them back to their residence, and that's why it kept stalking her, because when they were out
I know,
in the woods
it seemed
she
like,
may have left a
I know,
calling card.
because they like, yeah, exactly, because they like had neighbors around them, but this thing kept coming to their house.
Oh, it also went to their neighbor house too, because she saw
it went to their neighbor
into
house,
their neighbor's house.
But this thing was a frequent visitor to their house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and this thing, there was even no wildlife on their property. They had an orchard out back of apples and stuff, which is a magnet for deer.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't even so much as have rabbits on their property.
Yeah.
This thing kept coming back so much.
Somebody's asking, like, how did the coyote open the RV? It wasn't a coyote. It was, people are saying that the thing that attacked these campers was a dogman. And so there's still talking about how the mics are messed up, Spooky. I don't know if during intermission we can possibly fix it or whatever, but because my mic keeps going out and yours is super loud, so you might have to turn yours down some. I don't know why tonight is messing up so bad. But the LBL incident, you know, real or not, I'm really not sure. Like I said, I couldn't locate any newspaper articles pertaining to the family's death in LBL during the 80s, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't. But there's none that I could find during my research. But when they said that the people were told to keep it quiet and not talk about it, it wasn't the first time that I've heard of things like that. There have been other cases that I've heard or read about, like there was this one where I came across on Reddit, you know, and I will post the link of that so you guys can read this guy's encounter, but he was he worked in the national forests. I don't know why I can't say this. Apple. How do you say that one? Apple.
Appalachian.
I think it was that one. But
Oh,
he,
Appalate. Appa. I can't do it either. APALACHICOLA.
Cola, whatever. Anyway, national forest. We suck tonight at words, or our mics are messing up too. Sorry.
Appalachicola.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're like. But anyway, this guy worked for it for like 10 or 12 years, and it was back in the 90s. And there was this huge fire that occurred there, and both he and another forestry guy, they were driving around looking for injured wildlife, for burns or smoke inhalation and stuff. And they were going up, making their way up and down the roads so that they could bring them into the vet's command center to help see if they could help the animals or if they had to put them down, type of thing. So they were cruising down the road, and at one point, this large black figure, it darts out on the road on all fours, and it collides with the front end of the side of the driver's side truck. And the guy said it was going about 40 miles per hour, whatever, and they ended up running this thing over. So they stopped the truck, thinking it was probably like a bear. And they both hopped out to check on it to see if they killed it or, whatever, or if they had to toss it in the back of the truck to take it in for help. And when they walked up to this thing, they said that they saw it was nothing that they've ever seen before. It was 6 feet tall. It had legs. It had kneecaps. It had feet like that of a human would have. Its arms were a really long length that just hung down to about where the knees were. They said it was covered in 3 to 5 inches of long hair on its arms, legs, and head, but on the hair and on the chest and the head and the neck was a lot shorter. And he said the muscle definition on this creature was like that of a wrestler or like a UFC fighter. It was just like ripped, just muscled up. And he said when they turned this thing over, they could see that its jaw was broken because they ran it over with the truck, but they said that it had a snout like that of a baboon or what a werewolf would look like. So of course they radioed into headquarters and they told them that they had hit something really strange and they gave the location. Well, 20 minutes later, 2 FWC officials show up and they all try to pick up this thing and load it in the back of the truck. And they said that this thing weighed at least 400 pounds. And the FWC guys, they told them, well, hey, you should go back to the center, fill out some reports on it, and when they would, contact them later and let them know what the heck this thing is, what they ended up killing. So while these 2 guys were filling out their incident reports, 2 government officials arrived and they started talking to them both, and they asked them questions like, what happened? Where did you guys end up hitting this thing? Can you take us back out to the location? And they said, yeah, of course. So they examined the guy's truck for evidence, and then they all got into the vehicle, and they headed back out to the spot where they hit this thing. Now, after a while, apparently, the government guys were talking to themselves, and they were all kind of standing around looking and stuff. And they turned to the forestry guys, and they say, well, you ran over a bear. And the DNR guys were like, no, that's
a deer.
A bear. And the guys were
bear.
Like, yeah. The guys were like,
a deer?
That was no bear. And the government guy told them, from here on out, that's the thing that you all hit. It was a bear. And the story that you tell people is just going to be that. It was a bear. And in fact, you're never to speak about this matter again. And if you do, you're going to face charges, you're going to lose your jobs, and you're going to end up losing your retirement fund and everything else. And if you do talk about it with other people, we're just going to slander your name and make fools of you, make you all look like idiots. So when they were heading back, to the command center, that's, they were just heading back and they're like, what the hell? We know we didn't hit a bear. And the guy was like, there was 4 other guys who witnessed that this thing wasn't a bear, besides these 2 government guys and stuff. But they were all told to keep their mouth shut. So it goes back to the LBL incident when they talk about how those guys were told, that they're not supposed to talk about anything either. And, they're talking about this government cover-up and stuff. And the guy, he clearly knew he didn't hit a bear, And they were saying that these people, these government guys, obviously knew what it was that they hit. They've come across these creatures before meeting up with these guys, because if why else would they go to great lengths to try to cover this thing up and to keep it from reaching the public's eyes and ears?
It's amazing, you know. I mean, why would they keep this thing a secret? And the thing that amazes me is that the government will go to great lengths and even ruin your reputation and your life just to keep a secret. And I don't understand it, because why in the world, if these things are out there, why in the world would you keep it a secret? People need to know. They're going into these woods. People are going into the woods and not coming out. What's getting them?
Let's take a quick break. And during the intermission, I'm going to see if I can end up fixing the mic, because some people are obviously having problems hearing me. You're coming out really loud, and I'm coming out really quiet.
I turned my mic down.
I know, but let's just take a quick 3-minute intermission. That way I can try to see if I can fix this audio issue for some people, so it just comes out level for everybody. This stuff happens. You're live. You never know what complications are going to happen with YouTube and
That's
everything
true.
else. So, you guys, I'm just going to take a quick 3-minute break. Hopefully we fix this, and we'll come back, and we have a whole lot of other things to talk about. So don't leave. Stay with us. Just go get a drink of water or some popcorn or whatever, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight's topic is Cryptid Encounters, Dogman Encounters. Or Dogman, sorry, didn't mean to say Dogman Encounters, a totally different channel.
Yeah.
We're kind of messed up a little bit tonight because audio was going weird, and when you do shows live and weird things happen, it kind of throws you off your game a little bit, but hopefully you guys can hear us okay, and you can hear Spooky okay. Spooky's back, right?
Right, I'm there.
All right, cool. what we were talking. Oh, we were talking about the government stuff and how those guys ran over a Dogman, and clearly the government man knew what this thing was even without seeing it, and they basically threatened the guys saying, you hit a bear, that's all you hit and nothing more. Don't look any more into this, and just keep your mouth shut and go back to enjoying your job, and if you raise any stink more about this, you'll regret it, is basically what they were saying. So
Right.
if there's people, and this isn't the first time where I've kind of heard incidences like this, because when we do our shows with missing people in national state parks and forests and stuff, there were guys that were kind of threatened there too. So it really makes you wonder,
Right. It does. But I've read several reported encounters, though, that seem to take place in Kentucky. People have heard about the Waddy werewolf, where it was attacking livestock. A werewolf spotted in Erlanger, Kentucky, Breeding, Kentucky. They have a bipedal wolf creature roaming around there that they termed Barilla.
Yeah,
And
I heard a lot about that Barilla. I was really reading a lot about that.
yeah. And one of the earliest sightings was back like in the 1940s, but not the last. In the 1980s, there were two officers who were investigating a sighting in the Ashland Cemetery, and they claimed they were cornered by an animal, and that it paced back and forth growling at them until finally it ran off into the woods. And they said that it was a Dogman creature. I mean, they came right out and said it.
Yeah, I was surprised, but there's actually a lot of police officers or people like lawyers or really people who could, kind of lose their job, who are actually coming out and they're talking more and more about this. There's a lot of people coming out. And there's a website called, The Cloak Hedgehog?
Yeah.
Where this woman is putting everybody's accounts up on a big Google map, and the thing's practically covered with red dots all over the United States. And it's not just, the United States, but it's happening all over the world. And we actually had a viewer, reach out to us. And on July 24th, we're going to have a paranormal talk night. And this person shares with us their Dogman encounter that they had happen to them when they were in the Philippines.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, his story, his encounters scared the bejeebus out of me, But, going back to Kentucky, Murray, Kentucky, there was incidents there. This woman, she said she saw this creature that she believed to be that of a Dogman. It was crossing the road. But at the time, she didn't know what it was. She saw it cross the road. It was in the field. So she pulled over, and she gets out of her car, and she yells at this thing. And this thing stops in the field, and it turns, and it stands up on two legs and looks at her. And obviously, she was like, holy crud,
Yeah.
And she was hoping, like, another car would come by and see this thing, but none did, so obviously she hopped in the car and got out of there. But, I mean, she kind of had, a good set of rocks on in her shirt to be able to hop out of a car and yell at a creature that you don't even know what it is. I mean, these things, as far as I know, are super fast that I've heard so many accounts.
Right.
There was another account that happened in Bell County, Kentucky. Several people online were sharing their encounters, what they believed was a Dogman that was off of this highway, like 119. And I guess it seems to stay in this area, and it has been for years. But I read tons of different encounters written about online in that area and in Kentucky. But it's not just Kentucky. I saw this article online, in a newspaper article, where this young boy, he lived in Wisconsin, and he was out one night walking his dog. I think it was like 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock. And it was in his neighborhood streets, not far from a wooded area. And when he got to the section, he said that he heard some growling. So when he looked in that direction of the sound, he said that he saw a pair of yellow eyes, and that this thing stood there and stared at him for a moment. And he was staring at it, trying to figure out, what it was he was looking at. And he said this thing stepped out on 2 feet, like a person would walk. It was like 5 foot tall, if not a little bit taller. He said it had black and gray fur, and it was like this dog-like creature that, walked like a human. He said it had like a long snout and pointed ears, and it had really long, dark gray claws, like fingers like how raccoons have, but they were at least 2 inches long, the nails were. And he said when this thing took a few steps towards his direction, that's when him and his dog bolted back down towards the street for his house, which I don't blame him, you know?
I don't blame him either. I mean, this thing was scary enough, it scared his dog.
Yeah, but that's not the only account I've read or heard about in Wisconsin. Besides, that's where our one friend has their encounter at their family's place, too. They live in Wisconsin. But Wisconsin is like a hot spot for these things.
Right.
You know, and I guess it's really when we looked at the maps and you're reading all these different things, it's really all over the United States, and it's also in Canada. And like I said, last night we had a viewer reach out to us, and we had an interview with him, and you guys are really gonna enjoy next week's show on the 24th because it's quite scary. I don't know how I would handle being face to face with a Dogman creature.
Oh, me neither. Me neither. That's, you know, it just seems to me like the reports that I'm reading or anything. Okay, you had an encounter with a wolf, okay, and that wolf hesitated. I don't think a Dogman would. I mean, there are reports of these things all over the place. The United States, Canada, the UK, South America, especially in Brazil, Russia. I mean, they're just all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like in 2007, in the Brazilian town of, let's see if I can get the name of this town right, Sao Gonçalo dos Campos, a security camera captured footage of this strange creature walking through a backyard. Mm-hmm. Now, people in the town believed that it was a werewolf, although the video is a bit grainy and you really cannot tell what the creature is. It caused enough concern that a curfew was imposed for several days. Now, this video has surfaced several times with different backstories, and you can see it on YouTube. In at least one case, it was declared a hoax, citing, you know, that it was a man in some sort of costume. But this TV show that I watch, and Raven watches it too, it's called Strange Evidence. And they examined the footage, and they declared the animal not to be of human origin by their experts, so-called experts. As a matter of fact, they stated that it does not resemble any known animal in the area or even in Brazil. Now, since this town is located on the edge of a section of the Brazilian rainforest, they stated that it could be a species of animal not yet discovered. And this actually makes sense if you think about it. You know, I mean, what better place for an unknown animal to live or hide, you know, in this rainforest? And this is not the only sighting of a cryptid in Brazil. There have been numerous reports of werewolves down there. A woman in Sao Sepe reported being attacked by a huge dog that walked on its hind legs like a man, like in January of 2009. In Tua, the police reported receiving several complaints of a half-man, half-wolf breaking into houses and also stealing sheep.
Yeah, that's the thing that's creepy, because it's one thing to have like a predator animal who's roaming around outside. Okay, yeah, you know, don't go in certain areas. You're encroaching into their territory. But you're hearing stories of these things turning doorknobs, opening windows, and coming inside people's homes. There's obviously a form of intelligence to these things, and they know what they're doing. They know how, you know what I mean? Those encounters scare me. Because what if you're sleeping and these things open the door and just...
I know, because there are reports of them walking up to people's homes and trying to get in through the front door, you know, and some have even said that they heard, you know, when they tried to get through the front door, it would kind of
jiggle the handle.
The handle, that's it, thank you, the doorknob. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. In like 2015 near Homer, Nebraska, one night, 6 friends decided they were going to go off into the woods and find the grave of this old witch. And I have heard about this because Homer, Nebraska sits in northern Nebraska. They're on the corner of Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa. And at one time, I lived right there in that corner area. So I had heard about this grave of this old witch. And the grave was in the woods. Mm-hmm. So they went off into the woods and they did find the grave. And they decided, well, they're going to hang around a bit, and try to scare each other. And anyway, and this was at night, and I think it was around Halloween. And because that's usually when people would go off into those woods and try to find that grave. But anyway, for some reason, something just didn't seem right, and they got this feeling of dread and of being watched, so they decided to go back to their cars. Well, as they were heading back, they got the feeling of being followed. They would hear footsteps. They would hear like these sticks breaking, like something was stepping on them. They would hear rustling, like something going through the brush. And whatever it was that was following them was keeping pace with them, but it was just kind of just out of sight. Now, it wasn't long before panic set in and they started running. And in their panic, they became lost in these woods, but they did come into a clearing. They ended up coming into a clearing that was right next to a pasture with cows in it. But they said something still wasn't right because the cows were restless and mooing, and then they started running around in such a frenzy that they knew that it wasn't them spooking the cows. And they said then suddenly they heard this hair-raising scream. And one of them even said that it was so intense that he felt it in his chest. Well, they looked back to the tree line, and there was something standing there looking at them. Excuse me. They said it had yellow eyes, the face of a German shepherd, and it stood about 6 feet tall. Now, seeing this, they took off in a dead run. I mean, panic really set in at that time. And in about another 5 minutes, they said, they came upon this road. Well, it took them a few minutes to, get their bearings, and they had to walk another 3 miles to get to their cars. And they said that the whole time they could hear this thing in the woods, which was just a few feet from the road, and they heard this thing the whole way, all the way to their cars. And when they came to their cars, they got out of there as fast as they could. And at least 4 of these guys claim that to this day, they have not gone back into those woods.
Yeah, could you imagine? I would have been running the whole time. I would have been strolling back to my car.
I can imagine the panic that set in because they took off in a dead run, didn't know where they were going. They ended up lost.
Yeah, and you always think, like, in those incidences, how many of your friends are thinking if they can trip you to save themselves and keep on running? There's just some people that I've talked with, they're like, well, if that happened to me, I'd use my other friends as bait. And I'm like, well, note to self, don't go anywhere with this person,
Yeah, exactly.
Hope nothing hits
That's
the
what
fan.
I would do. I would be running. Anybody that tried to pass me, I'd trip them.
See, okay, I'm not hanging out with you then, because obviously, like me, I would be saving my friends, like, let's go. You're like,
when
I'd be tripping my friend.
When it comes to a situation like that, it's every man for himself. That's a case of run or be eaten.
Well, that's not how I am. I'd make sure my friends made it out with me. I'd leave no person behind. That's my personality. But that reminds me, there was a story that I'd heard or read. There's so many things I've read and been researching up on this because I find it so interesting because there's so many people that are encountering these things. You just want to know what they are. But I remember there was these people who went to go hang out by this old abandoned church, and they said while they were exploring inside, like several of these Dogman creatures came crawling out of an old well next to the place, and of course they were freaked out. They weren't going to go outside, and these things were messing with the guy's car. They actually climbed in the car and urinated in it. They knew how to open the car doors and other things. So I find it fascinating that there's multiple stories of these people talking about how they know how to open door handles or they know how to open windows, Oh,
yeah. Everything you hear, these things are just absolutely intelligent.
Yeah, so it has to be more than just a plain old animal, like you'd meet in the woods. How do they know these things? And people talk about when they have these encounters and stuff, it's almost like these things can actually almost read their thoughts and like they're almost mocking them in a way, because with the people that we've talked to who have had personal encounters with these things, they say like when they're staring at you, it's like They almost look like they're grinning because they know that they're
Yeah.
creating so much fear within you. And they talk about...
And I think they might just feed on fear.
It's a possibility. The thing is, I know nothing about this, and that's why I'm trying to read and hear and learn as much as I can, because obviously there's something out there, because there's far too many people who are encountering these things, and it's more and more frequent nowadays. Or maybe it seems like it just because we have the internet and more people are opening up about it. But back in the day, we didn't have the net where people could come out and share all the things that they're having, you know what I mean? And, we've been on the air almost 5 years, and it took me a good while to even share some of my own personal encounters, because it's hard to open up and talk about stuff because your family members or friends aren't going to believe you. And I think that's why a lot of us came online searching for other people who have had experiences in the strange things, with cryptids or the paranormal or whatever. And we've kind of created a community of support for each other, But, everybody's heard about the Michigan stuff. There's always Dogman in Michigan and stuff.
So I didn't mean to laugh. Track Slayer says, I don't have to be the fastest, just faster than my friends.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. But, a lot of...
Because we were talking about running and tripping people.
Well, I wasn't talking about tripping people. You were.
I was.
But I'm
sorry, I just found that hilarious.
But a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people have read up about the Michigan stuff and a lot about the Beast of Bray Road. But, a lot of people, one of their first ones hearing about it was when they heard about the cabin that was attacked in Luther, Michigan. Because this cabin was tore up, the screen and the moldings were ripped apart, the windows, and the cabin was just surrounded by, dog tracks, prints. And these prints, the dog prints, were also found on the windows. They had teeth marks, that of canine that was found on the cabin door and all the molding and stuff. And they, people thought, oh, it's a bear and everything else. But the DNR came out and said, no, this is some type of dog of some kind. Destroyed this cabin and broke into it, But there was this one incident I read online. I think it was posted on Above Top Secret forum. And everything we're talking about tonight, we're going to put it in links so you guys can read in far more detail than what we're saying, because we're kind of just paraphrasing and just kind of shooting through a little bit. But there was these two young guys. They were in Canada, kind of like in the northwestern region. And it was, near this small coal mining town. And when they were out walking, heading towards their place or whatever, because you're surrounded by woods and everything, they said that this 8-foot tall wolf-like creature was walking on two legs, and it stepped out into the clearing of a cut line. And they said that this thing had black fur, it had two pointy ears on the top of its head, and it was sort of like a wolf head, but it was a lot wider. They said this thing was very lean and fit, and that they said that when this thing was walking across the cut heading into the other section of the woods, it turned and it looked at them, and it gave this deep grunt growl, like a low growl. And they said that the way that it was walking on two legs and how quickly and fluidly it crossed the cut in such a short time span, they said that there was no other two-legged animal or person that could match how gracefully this thing moved. And, it wasn't the only Canadian encounter I read. I read so many encounters that happened in Canada. It's just kind of shocking.
Yeah, there were a lot of them up there.
Yeah, it's just shocking to me how many people are having these encounters with these animals or I don't even know what to call them, But, there's just too many to say that this thing doesn't exist. It obviously something exists, more than probably people want to believe. But, speaking of the northern regions, while I was researching, trying to find out more or find any newspaper articles on the LBL incident, I did come across other newspaper articles where they were talking about people having run-ins with these wolf-like creatures. And I also came across where people are being attacked and killed by an unknown predator animals that were blamed, because, people were being found. The people go missing and then they find them, and they said, well, they're they're in ditches or whatever else, and they're saying, well, some kind of animal attacked them. But most of the time they would say, oh, these animals that killed them, these people were either feral dogs or, local dogs or whatever. So I started to look up people who were attacked by dogs, because I got off track and I thought, okay, well, let me see how many strange cases there are with animal attacks that are killing people in certain areas, like rural areas or whatever. So I really got into looking into that, and I found a lot, and it's quite sad how many people are killed by dogs. But I came across this article of a teenage girl who was found in a ditch. It was in the early hours, and they said it appeared that she was attacked by dogs and that she ended up succumbing to the weather. It was like winter months or whatever. But they theorized that this girl, she snuck out to go meet her friends and she was attacked. Although they absolutely had no proof or DNA to pinpoint what dogs did this, but they just said it was probably some local dogs in the neighborhood. But they had no idea. They just said, oh, it's just some dogs, because obviously it was like a canine type of bite that happened. Now, I did see another report of a young man. He was found in a cornfield that was, he was killed by dogs. But his clothes were all tore off, and they left him basically with a sock and shoe on. And they blamed it on the farmer's dogs. Although the people who were involved, the officers and everything else, said there was absolutely no proof that these dogs even did it. They weren't covered in blood and there was nothing, but they just blamed him on. It must have been them, because they were the closest thing, to the cornfield where this guy was dead, I'm not saying one way or the other, but there was these certain reports of people being killed by these unknown predators that they were saying that they were canine or bear or big cat, but there was no real proof that it was they just had no proof to prove it was these dogs in the neighborhood or whatever, because, when you do DNA testing, you'd find the person's blood on them or the animal's saliva on the person, but there was no proof, So it made me wonder if some of these reports of people being killed by these unknown predators, sort of like the LBL incident, if they were actually killed possibly by Dogman or Bigfoots, You're never going to really have government officials come out and say, or the media come out and say, yes, a Bigfoot did this, or yes, a Dogman caused this, because that would cause panic, and also would bring out all these wannabe hunters who are going to want to, make a name for themselves, like, oh, I killed this thing first, and then they end up shooting everybody else in the woods, because what was that show, Beast of the Bladenboro? Remember where this animals were coming around and they were attacking all these people's livestock and shredding them up, but they weren't even really eating them, and they weren't really sure. They assumed it was a big cat, but even then they still don't know what the thing was killing these things, but it's kind of like when we do those missing people shows. Sometimes, when I'm reading these things and stuff, it makes me wonder, is it possible that they ran into something like these things and that's why they disappeared?
That's a good question, because some of the people that were missing, they found them miles and miles away in areas that would have been impossible for them to get to. Mm-hmm. And it makes you wonder, did they run into a Dogman, or did they run into a Bigfoot? What in the world did it?
Something else.
Or something else.
Yeah.
I don't think all of them are cases of getting lost and succumbing to the elements.
Well, there's not, because there's some where people looked for them, followed the trail, and then all of a sudden they just disappeared.
Yeah, trail just disappeared.
And they disappeared, never been found. And, what was that? There was somebody I was reading about in Georgia. There was these guys who were working on the road line, and they took a break, everybody ate lunch, and then they were heading back to the section where they needed to work. And people turned around and saw the one guy walking, and next, when they looked back again to look for him, he was gone. And all they found was one of his shoes hooked on the barbed wire. Obviously, he was pulled over a barbed wire and pulled off into the field and taken away off into the woods and stuff. And they only found one shoe in one section and another shoe way otherwhere else, but no other signs of him. I think I'll probably talk about more on that incident when we do a missing case or whatever.
Right.
But in that area of Georgia, they also talked about having Dogmans and Bigfoots too. And it was just another weird thing that just happened, and there were people around. What happened to him? What took this guy? Obviously something dragged him, and it was strong enough to pull him over a fence and take off with him real fast before anybody could see what it is that did it.
Right.
But there was this other newspaper article that came out, and it was in Alaska. And it was about this young boy. Okay? I'm not saying this is a cryptid or not cryptid. But I was just reading this article, and it kind of caught my attention, and I thought, well, this is worth talking about, you know. But this young boy, he was sleeping, and he said this animal crashed through his window. And he said all he saw was this very tall, man-sized animal that had black fur. And when it crashed through the glass, it woke him up, and he heard it whimpering like a dog. And when he screamed, this thing jumped back out the window and disappeared. He lived, obviously, on the ground floor, you know, where your basement window kind of matches the...
Well, their homes are usually one story.
Right. But anyway, this thing ended up leaving claw marks on its wall, some blood stains, and black fur after it crashed through the window. Now, he said that it smelled like a wet, dirty dog, and it left behind this really powerful stench. And that when it crashed through his window, it made like this whimpering sound like that of a dog. Now, I think even the family mentioned in the article how this odor of this animal lingered in their house for hours. Now, he said after this thing jumped back out through the window, he ran to his parents' room and telling them he thought a bear broke through his window. But when I was first reading this article, it kind of made me wonder, was this actually a bear that busted through his window or something else? Because he had, in this picture where he's posing where the claw marks are and stuff, there's these large closet mirror doors, you know? And maybe this thing, whatever it was, saw its reflection in the mirror, and that's why it kind of fell through the glass into his room. And when I was reading it and stuff and watching it, he didn't really say he saw a bear for a fact. He just said he saw this man-sized animal that was black in fur, and it smelled and sounded like that of a dog. You know,
that's an interesting theory, though. You know, I'm just wondering. It's a possibility it probably saw its own reflection in that mirror.
Right. And I'm not saying it was or it wasn't, but it does make you ponder because of the smell, because of the size, and because he said it whimpered and smelled like a dog. Bears don't whimper like dogs and act like dogs, you know. But all he saw was a bunch of black fur. It came in so quick, and then it left out real quick.
I remember reading about that.
You know, so, I mean, it's just something that kind of made me wonder. And you know how they say that these Dogmans have that foul stench that just lingers around forever, you know?
Right.
I've been around bears, and, you know, because we were siding the house last summer, and a bear ran through our front yard, basically, because the guy was fielding our fields for the haying. And I think the bear was just leisurely hanging out in the field, and when the guy came around with the tractor and stuff, it scared the crap out of him. He's like, oh, and he ran through, you know, not even a few feet below our scaffolding and stuff, and it's like he didn't...
I remember you telling about that.
Yeah, I was glad I was up on the scaffolding, not on the ground, because my mom and my uncle were down on the ground talking, because he came over to visit for a little bit, and they're like, oh, there goes a bear. But obviously... It's like...
That always kills me.
Yeah.
Oh, there goes a bear.
Yeah. But, it was obviously a younger one or whatever, but it doesn't have that type of stench or smell that people talk about when they see these Bigfoots and these Dogmen, you know. So, you know, maybe it was a bear that broke into this kid's room, but maybe it was possibly one of these cryptids just because of the way he was explaining it, and it makes you wonder, you know, but...
I think bears are cleaner than like a Dogman or a Bigfoot because you never hear I've never came across a report where a Bigfoot was seen bathing in a creek or something, or a Dogman. But that's like that one cam that you and I watch of those bears up in Alaska. They're always in the water.
That's because they're getting fish.
Doesn't matter. They at least get in the water.
So, but these animals have been seen in the water, and they've been seen fishing. You know, so
yeah.
You're just saying these animals don't ever bathe?
I don't know. I've never seen a report of them ever taking a bath.
I see it. You know, I see some Bigfoot walking up and just smacking you. You know, because calling them filthy, but it just. I don't know. There's just so many things that we've read about, and when it comes to Dogman, me and you are not experts at all.
No,
we're extremely curious about it. We're always reading about it. We're always listening as much as we can about it. And, you know, if anybody tunes in that's ever had an encounter with these things, we invite you to come on and share with us your encounter as well as the viewers, you know. But
Right.
like we said, we did have somebody reach out to us yesterday, and we ended up doing an interview with him, and we're going to be playing it next week. And his encounter happened in the Philippines. And it wasn't just with a dogman. He also had a paranormal encounter with, like, a black-eyed adult as well.
Right.
But, you know, a lot of this stuff, it's just what people have said, you know, when it comes to research and encounters with these people are talking about. But there are people who talk about that. When we were studying for missing people cases and stuff, there was DNR people and, you know, national park workers, forestries or whatever, and cops and stuff, that they had mentioned that sometimes people will always stay on the permanently missing list when they come across these bodies who have been attacked and killed by these unknown predators and stuff. And what they do is they'll just say they never found these people and leave them on a permanent missing list, and then just dispose of the bodies, just so that they won't bring to attention these things. But it makes you wonder, why are they protecting these things? Why are they covering these things up? You know?
It's hard to say, you know. I mean, what are they? I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
Are they real? I personally have never had an encounter.
Yeah.
But there are too many reports to ignore. I mean, I have had a Bigfoot encounter, so I believe that Bigfoot are real. So it's not far-fetched for me to believe that dogmen exist. Do I believe in werewolves? That's a big no. I do not believe that a human can transform into an animal. So, you know, what are they? I have a theory on that. I believe they're engineered. I really do. And I know most of you are going to disagree with that, and that's okay. But there are reports of these things being around certain military bases. And there are also a few YouTube channels that are very convincing. One of them is Dogman Encounters with Vic Cundiff. And I hope Mr. Cundiff doesn't mind me mentioning him or his channel. But there is this one episode, and I'm not going to go into deep detail or mention names, but in this episode, a man in New York had an encounter on his property. He called this deputy sheriff that he was acquainted with, and the next thing he knew, these government people showed up on his property. Now, this man had trail cams on his property, and these government men, for more than a day, you know, I think it was 2 or 3 days, they really searched around his property, and they even took the SB cards out of all of his trail cams. Now, that right there tells me that they had something to hide.
Well,
and
that's not all of it. And, you know,
I paraphrased it because I didn't want to.
Well, no, we want you guys to go listen to it.
Yeah, we want you to go listen to that, because that is a very interesting episode.
Encounter that happened, but it's not the only encounter, because I guess when they came out, they were using some kind of device that was actually affecting his dog. But people say that, you know, it's something that they use, that these people are coming out into the area where people are having problems with these dogmen, and that they are using this type of device to kind of chase these things away from the areas, away from where people live. You know, kind of like how they trap bears and move them to another section, whatever. They're, you know, trying to push these dogmen away from where people are camping, living, and what have you. And I know that this guy came back on just here recently on Vic's channel, telling how these things are still coming back and terrorizing his family home. And I think it was even mentioned that they were actually breaking into his house while they were in there sleeping. So you guys should go there and check out
definitely check out that channel.
Yeah, it was I don't think it was last Friday, but the one before that this guy just came back on, which I still got to listen to the other parts of it. But, yeah, that guy's just one of many where they just have really frightening encounters and stuff.
Yeah.
Where people are just having all these troubles with these things, you know? It blows my mind, you know?
Exactly, yeah. But this particular episode, though, you know, and hearing about these government men, that tells me that they had something to hide. I mean, literally, every state in this country has a military base. New York alone has 13 military bases, and it also has Plum Island. Raven and I did a show on Plum Island. Now, this is a place where genetic experiments were conducted along with a few other little experiments, and some of those experiments escaped.
Oh, um, yeah, that's when we did a show on bioweapons facilities that were like all across the country, and
Yeah,
how they were basically creating and releasing infectious diseases, on purpose, like Lyme's disease and everything else. They're the ones who are bringing forth these things and then releasing them and stuff. And there's a long history of them openly doing this. And then
oh
how they
yeah,
raced over to Germany, got all the German Nazi scientists and brought them back, and then they still continue to work at this day. It's just another weapon that they use on their own people and for war. But
yeah.
that's there's a whole lot more
Well,
to that show than just them experimenting with
oh
creating
yeah,
things.
exactly. But it just seems reasonable to me that it's possible that these things were created by man. I mean, why else would they try to keep them a secret or try to hide the fact that they exist? Not to mention, like you mentioned before, where they threatened those men with their careers and their retirement and their reputations. And, I mean, they're going to great lengths, even threatening to destroy people's lives just to keep this a secret.
Yeah.
Now, I know many of you disagree with me, and that's okay.
Well, none of us
It's
have
just my own
affirmed.
personal opinion or my thought on them.
But none of us have, like, I mean, I have no firm saying, like, it's this, it's that, or whatever. Tonight, basically, I've just been kind of bantering about what other people are talking about, what they theorize about, and just, I kind of have a feeling that it's an animal, but something more than just your average predator, because obviously the way that it behaves, the way it reacts, the way that it knows how to manipulate objects, daily objects that we use, like getting into a house or getting into a car, there's something more to these things. And
they're just too damn intelligent.
Right, and after you guys listen to our next week's show interview with the guy who had an encounter in the Philippines, and then you can go back and listen to the one we had earlier where we had a guest come on where this one's stalking her house, was peering in their skylights and everything else. But I'm not sure what these things are, but after speaking, like I told you, with a bunch of them and stuff, it just really gets me to thinking. It makes me want to do more research. I don't want to see one in person. I think I'd rather meet a Bigfoot than I would meet a
I don't want to see one in person
Dogman. I don't mind, if somebody said some trail cams or IR cams, and we could just watch live that way. Cool beans, I'll do that. I just don't want to run into a Dogman. I'd rather meet a Bigfoot face to face than a Dogman, because Dogmen seem to be more sinister, whereas a Bigfoot doesn't seem as bad, although I have heard of them attacking people before. In some cases, true or not, I don't know, but I do think these things are real living beings. They're physical. Where they come from, I don't know, but from different cultures, it seems to me that they have been here for a long time, only because they've been mentioned almost since the beginning of human history. And there is that Army Atlas that talks about, them knowing about Bigfoots. We came across that newspaper article a long time ago when we were doing Bigfoot shows and stuff. And, they know the regions where these Bigfoots are, and they know, kind of like where they're at, what they eat, and they kind of keep people out of the area and stuff. So why wouldn't they know about these other cryptid too? It's not just Dogman, but people are seeing flying humanoids and reptilian things and other stuff. So, and if they know about Bigfoots, why wouldn't they know about these other things? And obviously they're involved. There's Army people who've come on and said that they've had battles with certain things, or they push these things away, or if they kill them, they take their body away. Why are they hiding these things? Why are they afraid?
There's a military base in Washington. I think it's Fort Lewis. And when these guys are out doing things and they spot a Bigfoot, they stop what they're doing to let the Bigfoot go on about its business. They will stop activity on whatever they're doing, whatever area they happen to be in, if a Bigfoot happens to be crossing the road or come out and go somewhere, whatever. So these military people know these things exist.
Yeah. There's something about all of this. What it is, who knows? And there's so many other show topics that we do. It kind of touches base with these type of things. And, I know we have to do a show on Hollow Earth still, because I know that's been requested by a lot of people. But
yeah,
we're going to put in our reference links tonight for you guys to see everything that we read, But you can also read it in far more greater detail than what we did. We just kind of shortened it up a little bit. But you can also go and listen to people's encounters. There are people out there who do far better job at speaking about these things because they've researched it more. And
they spend their lives researching these things.
Yeah. And like I said before, Spooky and I, we're not experts, but we're like you guys. We're very interested in learning as much as we can about all these different things that are going on, and trying to figure out and learn more about it. But, I remember growing up and, you hear stories of the Wolfman, or there's times where you're watching these creature movies, and whatever else. And I used to watch them with my dad, only when my mom was out on an errand or visiting with a friend, because there's no way she would ever let us watch monster movies, But, there's just tons of these movies that came out on these creatures. But to me, it seems that these things are not just that of imagination of Hollywood and novels, but these are actually real living creatures that stalk and they harass livestock and people all across this planet. There are people all across the world that are sharing their encounters with these things, and they're all ranging in different types of encounters. Some of them just being a brief friendly encounter to a downright scary, terrorizing, stalking, and they're killing their family pets, their livestock, and even sometimes humans,
Well, I know a lot of the play on these werewolves or dogmen and stuff, might be a Hollywood thing. But, they're making movies about them. They had to get the idea somewhere. Mm-hmm. This can't be something that was just made up.
Yeah.
They had to get these stories somewhere. And, of course, they embellish on them, well, it was a man turning into a wolf, or whatever. But I don't know how long they've been around. The earliest report I think I found was like 1936.
That's when, no, because we saw stuff way before that. Remember on other shows when we were talking about the skinwalkers and the wendigos and other things. But, I mean, it goes back when what was that show in Utah we did where they were on the petroglyphs and talking about these humanoids and stuff and how they were trying to coexist with some of them, but other ones there's no way that they actually moved out of the area, and you got to stay clear of certain ones because they'll just come down and kill you. Well, the
hieroglyphics over there in some of the pyramids in Egypt, they have these hieroglyphics, which are pictures of these men with dog heads. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm thinking I think it's called Anubis or something like that, but wasn't that some sort of a god?
Well, I know some people say that these cryptids that people are encountering are like the Nephilim,
Yeah.
And stuff. And we also did a show on giants and stuff. But this topic is going to be obviously a reoccurring one. Tonight we just kind of did it to just kind of banter about it a little bit. Throw out just a couple little examples that we've come across and saw. But, of course, me and you are going to keep researching this and learning more about it. And hopefully we'll have more people reach out to us who want to share their encounters with these things. And we'll be able to share it with you guys live, too. But like I said, next week on the 24th, we'll have an interview with a guy who had one in the Philippines. But I don't know. Do you want to kind of end it here? Because I'm kind of worried that YouTube and the programs are still messing up and people are probably having audio problems. And we may have to end up fixing this later on. I have no idea how it'll end up turning out, but
well, I want to thank our mods, Nell and Doppel. I think they were the two that I saw in there. Thank you for doing a good job. Thank you to everyone who came in to listen to the show. Join us July 24th, 2018 at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, and 6 p.m. Pacific for Paranormal Talk. We haven't had Paranormal Talk for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a guest. His name is Joe. Joe's going to share with us his encounter that happened in the Philippines with an aswang and a dogman creature.
What?
Thank you. What?
I said, yeah. Right, it's true. Well, it's like a skinwalker is what he was saying what the name is for.
Thank you for coming. Please subscribe to us, give us a like, and please share us with others on any social media site that you may be a part of.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. Sorry about the technical issues.
And thank you, Raven, for a good show.
Yeah, sorry about the technical issues earlier. Hopefully, the podcast turns okay for you guys. But if you do want to get show reminders, you can just click your on our Spooky Raven name and subscribe, and you'll find out when we're live again. Or you can go to our Facebook page, like and follow us there for seeing upcoming shows. Or you can also contact us there and suggest show topic ideas. Or if you want, you can share with us your own personal encounters with the paranormal, strange, and anything else. Or, you can also contact us at our email, anythingbutordinary@live.com. We hope everybody has an amazing week, and we'll see you next week for paranormal talk. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.